Welcome back to Not Another Mummy podcast with me, Alison Perry. Whether you've got teenagers or your kids are younger and you're looking ahead to what's to come, the topic of teenagers and social media is one that lots of us are thinking about. My guests today are Alexandra Evans, Head of Safety Public Policy Europe at TikTok. She's basically an expert on keeping young people safe online. Also, Myleene Klass, who, as well as being a musician and presenter, is a mum of 3, including 1 teenager, and who has plenty of experience and wisdom around the online world. Today we cover stuff like how to talk to your kids about social media, how to set boundaries and guidelines, what kids need from us, their parents, when they're first stepping into the online world, and loads more. I learned a lot from our conversation, so hopefully you'll find it as useful as I did. A warm welcome to both of you. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, good. Very good. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, this is very exciting.
So we're here today to talk about teenagers and online safety. Myleene, as parents, we need to navigate the world of teens being online. In fact, both of you, because you're both parents of teenagers, am I right? Alexandra, you've got teenagers, haven't you?
I've got 3. I don't know, does an 18-year-old count? She's technically off the books, but doesn't feel that way. I've got a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old. Yeah.
So, right. So we're all in the thick of it, right? This is it. And in terms of teenagers and online safety, it can feel like a bit of a minefield, can't it? How do you guys cope with this as parents, first of all?
Go for it, Myleene.
Okay, I'm going in. Okay, I've got a 14-year-old, I've got a 10-year-old, and I've got a 2-year-old. And I also have 2 stepchildren as well, so 10 and 14 again. And I think especially before lockdown, I would have, tried to really keep a lockdown on devices. I was always very aware on how much time was spent on devices. And then suddenly lockdown happened and we were encouraging our children to sit in front of computers and do their online schooling. And I think in so much as when that happened, it really made me just look at things very differently once again. And it made me just think it isn't actually the time spent. It's the time spent where. What is it they're doing on there? Who are they speaking to? How is it working in their little worlds? And I think a huge mistake that a lot of parents make that I'm seeing over and over again is that there are no conversations going on because you think your children are using their mobile phones or their technical devices in the same way that you use yours. So if you glance over it, if you look at their messages, if you look at their texts, if you look at their socials, if everything seems to be okay, then you just assume that it's okay. But they're delving into different sites and they're having different conversations and they're using their phones in completely different ways. And this is something you have to become au fait with, not to spy on them, but just to still guide them because they are still children.
Yeah, that's still true. Alexandra, Myleene mentioned just now about the pandemic and lockdown. How do you think that has affected how teenagers are using the online world?
It's such a great question because, I think sometimes we say things like, oh, kids, they're always on their phones. I think that the truth is that digital has become ubiquitous in our society. It is not a separate space that you visit. It is integral in how you consume information, content, communicate with others. It has become a part, just a way of life. And I think that we're all trying to work out what that means. And on lots of different levels, on a societal level, but also, as Myleene says, sort of on a family by family level. So how do I think that digital, or how do I think the pandemic changed the way that they use their phones? I think that it created an additional use case, which was homeschooling. And I think that that's been really useful, and thank goodness for it, for sure. Yeah. But I think that it hasn't inherently changed the role that their phones play in their lives, which is that it's a conduit to, as I say, information, to friends, to everything else. And Myleene's point is really well made. you do need to understand like what their digital life looks like and be able to support it and parent it in the same way that you would be parenting their lives offline.
Yep, absolutely. And Myleene, you mentioned that they're using their devices, I guess, in a different way to how we're using them. And I think for me, so my daughter is 11 and she's not on, TikTok and social media, but for the first time a few weeks ago, I gave her a mobile phone. So she's now got one ahead of going to secondary school. And one of the things that really kind of struck me straight away was how differently she messages her friends. So like just little things like she would send a message to her friend saying, hey, and then wait for a reply. And then and then she'd be like, oh, I've got something to tell you. And then she'd wait for a reply. And I'm like, just send one message with the point. And I was like, okay, I did not at all foresee that I would have to teach her how to send text messages. It's just mind-blowing.
This is a really important point. Sorry, I'm going to talk about it because like they don't understand the subtleties of language. When they first start texting, like you don't understand that an exclamation mark can soften something. So something that might sound quite rude can, if you put a smiley face, it's actually got a different tone to it. So yeah, my daughter, who is the politest, gentlest child in the world, when she first started texting her friends, I was like, do you still have any friends? These are really not very, very soft and kind messages. And she was just like, oh, but also to the pace point and to Myleene's point again about them using it differently. Yeah, they are just so conversational. So they think I'm hilarious because I like punctuation. And they're like, what is punctuation for in a text message? So I'm totally with you that text etiquette is a weird new parenting thing that you do actually have to do.
It's not even just the etiquette. You can actually betray your age from how you text.
Oh, really?
So in the same, my daughter picks me up on this all the time and I find it very, very funny. But in the same way that you might have a grandparent who would text lol, thinking it was lots of love. And we all think, oh, isn't that funny? They put lol at the most inappropriate time. We're doing the same thing because my daughter will say to me, oh, that's so cute that you use that emoji. Does that really mean laughing? And I'm like, what do you use? And she'll say, we use a skull. Died laughing. So then I start using the skull, and then she said, oh, we don't use the skull anymore because all the mums have got into that and it's just really uncool. And now they're using it ironically. So it's things like that. It's almost that we are being mocked. We don't even realize it.
That is terrifying.
Oh, it's not, this is scratching the surface. We talked about this before, Alexandra, about the way we take photos. Again, Ava and her friends will just think it's really adorable. Look at the old folk taking their photos in that way. And I remember thinking my mum always took a photo by a tree or by a flower or by something.
So tell me, how do we take photos versus how do they take photos?
We take photos up here because we know it's good for our angles.
So up high. Okay. And how do they take them?
Down here, because they don't have the challenges that those angles require, because they can
have
take
no
them.
Double chins.
No. No.
I love it. Oh my goodness. It's one of those things though, isn't it? Like we would not hand a 17-year-old car keys and say, off you go, have fun. So likewise, we shouldn't just be letting our kids loose on the internet, but it's almost like as parents, we need to be taught how to teach our kids this stuff.
Yeah, I think that so this was something that I noticed from, when you tell people that you are a child safety specialist at TikTok, it's a bit like I think how my brother-in-law feels when he tells people that he's a doctor and people start asking to look at moles. Everyone's like, great, could you please just help me with these settings? And could you please tell me how many minutes exactly my child should spend on TikTok or Instagram or whatever it may be every day? And what I said to them was, do you know what? It's really important that you understand that your young people are on platforms and absolutely that you have a sense of where they are. But there is a point at which, if you are a teenager in the offline world, you are actually moving around your world relatively autonomously. I know where my 14-year-old is, but I'm not sitting next to her in the cinema holding her hand or feeding her popcorn or whatever it might be when she was littler. I'm just making sure that I'm a presence in her life, that I've set the boundaries of how she's navigating her online world or offline world, and that I'm there as a resource when things go wrong. So something that TikTok did to try and sort of I guess, simplify it, because being a digital parent is complicated, right? There's a lot of platforms, there's a lot of devices, it's a lot of content. We're being handed numerous manuals and lots of unsolicited advice. So we decided to work with young people themselves and say, well, actually, what do you want from your mum or your dad or your trusted adult? What would be helpful? And they came up with some brilliant ideas, and they distilled basically them down into 5 key tips, which is: help me understand the rules, be there to chat, don't panic when things go wrong, trust me, respect my privacy. And actually, the big spoiler of that is that none of those are digital qualities, right? Those are just being a good digital parent is the same thing as being a good parent. So I think that the way that we can best help our parents who are navigating complicated new devices and everything else is to say to them, you've actually got this. Just trust your instincts. There is a bit of additional learning, but if you're there and if your child knows that you've helped them set the parameters, but also when they come across things and they've gone wrong, which they will online and in online world, offline world, that you're going to be there. And what they really want is for you to just give them a hug and to be there as a resource to help them problem solve. I thought it was wonderful. And do you know what? We then asked parents what they thought about those tips, and we worried that respect my privacy, trust me, maybe they'd think that was a bit self-serving because, we're a platform, etc. But actually, the parents were like, those are our favourite. Because I think that sometimes parents of teenagers are being asked in the digital environment to parent in much more of a sort of preteen, very supervisory, very hands-on role way. And your daughter, is it a daughter that's 11 years old?
Yeah.
Yes. So she's at that moment where she's moving from that very supervised, we escort our primary school children around, we deliver them to the school gate, the teacher hands them back to the nanny or the granny, then we take over, to that point where they're becoming a bit more autonomous. And getting that moment of transition where you go from a purely supervisory, like I am standing next to you and watching what you're doing, to I think I've taught you the rules of the road, that I'm here if things go wrong, go try these things, but, come to me and let's stay close. That's a really difficult moment. It's that moment when you watch your child cross the road for the first time. It's not an easy place to be. So I think that things like those tips are really good, but also, again, I desperately want to plug my family pairing tool, which is something that TikTok's done that I think is really useful for that sort of transition moment. So your child is 13, they're coming onto TikTok. What can you do to make sure that you all feel comfortable that in that sort of moment of transition that you've set the guardrails? So family pairing lets you link your account to theirs, and then you can make some decisions like, can they use search? Make sure that it's that, the accounts are default private, but that, that the setting is locked to private. How much time do they spend on TikTok? And those parameters means that then hopefully you can start building up those conversations, that trust, and your child will be able to be a teenager, hang out with their friends, watch videos, but everybody has that sense that they are in a safe and, managed environment.
That's so good. And actually, one of my questions for you was, when your 13-year-old wants to go onto TikTok, do you have to spend a week logged in as them searching for skateboarding videos and cat videos so that the algorithm knows what to give them, and then you can hand the phone over and be like, here you go, you can use TikTok now? But it sounds like with family pairing you've kind of got that covered.
Well, yeah, I think that you just log on to TikTok for sure, and when you start on TikTok you will see content that will, we do quite like to diversify our content anyway. I don't know if you've seen any Myleene's videos. They are brilliant, completely brilliant. But, if we served you nothing but Myleene videos all day, you would say, actually, I've learnt every single classical instrument in the world.
Like, no offence, Myleene, but, it's time for something else.
I'm going to retract that, because I could happily watch your channel all day. And
that's very kind.
And having failed so miserably to learn any classical music as a child, I think it would be time well spent. But the point is that diversifying our content is actually important, because we only have very short videos. So there will be a range of content. So I hope that will serve as a useful thing.
You know what? From my personal experience with my daughter, I absolutely adore TikTok for a new conversation that it's brought to the forefront for us. So initially, I think people were introduced to it as dancers and learning and lip syncing to songs, but actually, I'm obsessed with TikTok in my own right. My daughter and I were laughing because she was doing her homework and I was watching TikTok videos the other day, and she was like, "What is this role reversal? What are you doing?" But I adore it because there are things that I've been introduced to from there's anatomy classes. I follow some very, very sort of, I suppose I'd say left of field accounts, but I guess there are other people following them, so they're very popularist, really. Historical accounts I love. Vintage makeup accounts. It is phenomenal when you actually do start to get into it, and I can have new conversations with my daughter. We send TikToks to each other and we comment on them together, and it's a really lovely conversation. And I think there are so many parents out there who are so scared of it, quite intimidated by it, because they either think it's very one-dimensional, which it's completely the opposite, or actually they've never dipped into it themselves. I really do agree with what Alexandra's been saying about the conversations you have. And the idea of trust me, it's a really, really powerful statement, because we have actually encountered some situations, not my daughter directly, but my daughter's friend. And I actually got to be cool mum. I mean, that does not happen very often. And my daughter's friend came to me and said, "I've got myself into a situation with something that's happened online. Ava says you're going to be able to help me out here." And I was like, "Leave it with me." I didn't feel that it was overly serious, so I did deal with it. But the fact that they both came to me and I dealt with it, and I showed them that they could trust me with that information, it was a really, really important moment for all of us. Yeah. So I mean, I'm probably again not cool mum again for something else that I've done, but at that moment they will all know. So last week, but it just shows actually they're still trying to become adults. And you're absolutely right, whether it was digital or whether it was a problem at school or whether it was a problem in a friendship group, they just came to me and we dealt with it. And ultimately it's a very base level that you're dealing with. I think we get to a point where it almost becomes overcomplicated because we just think, "Oh, I don't understand that. It's just there's too many bells and whistles there." But actually, we're all just trying to prepare our children for the real world. And what does that look like? Now, if you'd have asked our parents 20 years ago, we were being prepared for a world that they didn't even know what jobs were going to exist. A digital creator. How were they ever going to, prepare me for any of this? Yeah. And what's nice is actually, I said to Ava, I'm just trying to give you transferable skills, because actually I could well be trying to prepare you for a job that just most likely doesn't exist yet. And it's going to be in the world of tech, or it will involve tech. So I think as a parent, actually, it's quite nice to demystify what's going on in the tech world. It's quite nice to know actually they just want our basic parenting skills, which are, you can trust me and I'm not going to throw you under the bus. I'm not going to tell you off. I'm going to try and figure it out with you. And actually we can watch cat videos and vintage makeup videos and some more anatomy videos, because that really plays into my hands as a parent. I'm like, look at this, rather than shying away from it. I'm like, this person's made a video about it. Let's look at it together. Let's talk about it. And my daughter will say, "Oh God, you're like the mum from sex ed." And I'm like, "Excellent." And we'll talk about it. And it's great.
The biggest compliment. Can you
That's
imagine?
the dream.
Yeah, she's cool. She's cool.
But isn't that funny? We've all three of us have got jobs that didn't exist when we were little. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, that is really interesting. And, and that will just keep happening. So our kids absolutely will have jobs that don't exist at the moment. So, Alexandra, earlier on you mentioned learning the rules of the road and teaching our kids the rules of the road. This is hard because, as Myleene says, so many parents aren't on TikTok. They're not using these social sites that our kids want to use. So would you say that it is really important to immerse ourselves as parents in that world? And what if that just doesn't appeal and that just feels like another thing that's, another thing to do and that's too hard? What do you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I get that, because some platforms appeal to me and it's fun to be on them. Like, I like Among Us, that game that we were all playing for about 5 minutes. That was really great. I love TikTok, but some of the platforms that my kids use, I will never be fluent in Minecraft. I just can't even move in any direction. And
I don't get it. I don't get it.
So I do think let's again take it back to basics. when your child is setting up an account, I do think that's a moment to stand by them and then to just make sure they know where their settings are. And I do think it's possible for parents to take that move, but I don't think you need to be able to kill a sheep in Minecraft to be a good parent in 2022. The other thing I would say is that absolutely parenting and parental oversight is important, but of course platforms have a real responsibility to build an inherently safe environment, and that is one of the reasons why I work at TikTok, because there is a huge commitment to creating a safe space for all of our users. Our community guidelines are quite on the conservative side. We don't allow, for example, adult content, etc. But we, I think, led the way when it came to thinking about the fact that teenagers aren't adults. If you think about digital even a decade ago, less than that, in fact, it was joining ages 13 and then you were just going to navigate that as if you were an adult. And TikTok was built with an assumption that the teens who use our platform aren't fully formed. Their early teens are different to late teens are different to adults, and everyone's on a journey and everyone's somewhere different on that journey. So, like, for example, if you join TikTok and you are 13, your account is default private. You can't use our direct messaging service. You can't host a live stream. You can't send or receive a virtual gift on TikTok until you're 18, So I think that what makes my work so interesting is that I'm working with child psychiatrists, with developmental psychologists, with prevention scientists to think about how you can actually design a product that is age appropriate for young people.
That's so interesting. I was chatting to a child psychologist recently, and she said something along the lines of, young people's brains aren't wired to switch off. So they get notification, they get that dopamine hit, and it keeps them going back and back and back for more, which is why it's so important for us to have clear boundaries, because their brains are actually wired differently to ours. So that it's just quite reassuring to hear you say that you're working with people like that and you know about this stuff.
Well, actually, on the point of that, self-regulation is a skill that I'm still a work in progress. My relationship with my phone could probably do a bit of work, but yes, teens are different to adults. Self-regulation is something that they do struggle with, need for instant gratification, short time between see and do. These are all quite familiar characteristics that we'll all recognize from our own kids for sure. So TikTok obviously has screen time tools for everybody, and they're also in the family pairing feature. But actually, we took the decision that kids do need a protected moment to sleep, and we needed to be responsible in protecting that need to just switch off and go to bed. So we actually work with sleep specialists and with child safety and wellbeing specialists to make decisions around how much time a child at 13 to 15 needs to be sleeping every night and how much they need for 16 to 17. And then we made the decision to switch off notifications 9 p.m. for younger teens and 10 p.m. for later teens. That literally factors in an hour's worth of settling time plus the prescribed amount of recommended sleep for those teenagers. And that's really useful. So that's a good example of how we as a platform can do our bit. We are not summoning kids onto our platform when it is in their best interest developmentally to be undisturbed and to be resting and to be sleeping. And of course, that makes us a sense, but is is an innovation that is something I'm quite proud of, actually.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's amazing. So if someone's listening and they're thinking, right, it's coming up to, I've got, tweens or, slightly younger children, but this is ahead and I know I need to have this conversation with them. What's the best way of them approaching the whole social media conversation with their kids?
Myleene, go on, you tell me how you did yours.
I really enjoyed this. Well, initially, I think I went in with my eldest daughter, as anybody who's new to it would do, which was I set really strict parameters. I put an app in that I could almost mirror what she was looking at. And then it got to the point where I just thought, you know what, this is just getting ludicrous. It got to the point where I thought, you know what, just tell me. And it was just a case of us both communicating and talking. And she showed me some really, really interesting points that actually I would never have learned if I just thought she was, again, like I said, using her phone like I use mine. If I said, where would you hide a photo? She showed me where her friends hide photos or where teens hide photos without breaking her own friendship trust or circle. But she was just showing me they do use their phones very differently. Now, it's not about trying to catch them out. It's actually about just joining them in a different language. There are definitely new cultural movements as a result, because certain words are blocked on TikTok or on any social platforms. But as teens, they will find other ways around it. Now, rather than say, you shall not use these words, it's quite interesting to see how that these new words are becoming a part of our culture, like unalived or segsy, spelt S-E-G-G-S-Y. Yes, because there are certain words that are blocked on certain social platforms. So it will alert. And so, loads of people now use those words in its own context. And I think that's actually quite interesting because, again, it's a generational shift. And rather than just saying, thou shalt not pass, this is evil, actually, if you embrace it and look at, what they're looking at, they're just doing the same things that we're doing. They just want to talk to their friends. They just want to be entertained. They want to see what the new fashions are. They want to see what the new trends are. My daughter was really interested to see how I do my transitions. Now, she taught me how to do those transitions. She wants to see what can her mum do. And it's a really lovely way that we can communicate. Half the songs that I play on my radio shows, Ava's been introduced to through TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm like, we did this first. It obviously makes me feel 100, but the fact that they're listening to Matthew Wilder and Fleetwood Mac, and these are our songs, but it's so wonderful they're being introduced to it through a different platform again, and it's not coming all from me, but we can have those discussions. And I just think rather than just fear it or dismiss it as, it's not something that, that's what they do. Oh, I'm not very techie. I hear so many mums say I'm not very techie, but in so doing, they're actually putting a wedge between themselves and their children, because there's a conversation that you're blocking then. I fully accept that I'm not going to understand everything that my children are talking about, because it's a different generation, and that's okay.
You're not meant to. You're not meant to get it. That's not how the world works.
But I should show that I'm trying. And I should show that I'm willing. Otherwise, it becomes something that they push underground and feel that either I don't understand it, I won't understand it, or I don't want to understand it. And none of those things are okay. And actually, there are things that you do get introduced to that you're like, this is amazing. This really is. And I love all the trends that come up, and they do definitely filter into the mainstream, and it becomes really quite funny. A girlfriend of mine said, you edit your videos so quickly. And I said, I watch your videos and they're too slow for me now. Now, if I showed my daughter Casablanca, or if I showed her, I tried to get them to watch Top Gun, and they were like, this is so slow.
Yeah, I tried to get them to watch Chariots of Fire. I nearly had a revolution. They were like, what? And when they do the slow-mo.
I get it. I'm the same too.
Yeah, good game's a quick game.
Yeah, a good game is a quick game. So just keep it moving. So I edit my videos really quickly now, because I just want to get to the point, get to the punchline. And when I watch some of my friends' videos, I'm like, oh my God, this is like Top Gun back in the 80s. So it's just a different way of consuming your media, and it's not so bad that we do actually take from what they're doing right now. Otherwise, I feel like we get left behind.
Yeah.
You don't want to get left behind, because otherwise you just put yourself in a time capsule, and that's not good either.
That's so true. Alexandra, have you got any final words of wisdom for the people listening who are feeling like, this is all just scary and terrifying and I don't know what to do?
My biggest piece of advice, and again, first of all, it's like having a new baby. The first piece of advice is don't accept unsolicited advice from people. Yeah, you've got this. Trust your instincts. I remember being given a lot of baby manuals, and the best thing I did was not read them and just to work it out slightly for myself. Myleene is absolutely right, though. Our young people, they're right. They want their own language. They want their own space. As soon as we start using the skull, they'll start inverting that and know that, they are going to invent their own language and want things to be cool that are different to what their parents think are cool. But they are, as a generation, fantastic. Gen Z are my undisputed favorite generation. They are warm, they are compassionate, they are tolerant, and as TikTok shows,
and they're informed.
Yeah,
they're informed because of things like TikTok, because they're having conversations that we never had access to.
And I think that they're very welcoming as well. Like, you watch TikTok, it's pretty unusual to see on other platforms intergenerational sharing, like whether it be Myleene and your kids, or whether it be the films of people in lockdown dancing in their back garden. Like, they are happily dancing with their mums and their granddads and their aunties without any kind of sense of shame or embarrassment. I would have been mortified if my mum had joined me on the dance floor. So gosh, this generation are fantastic, and they are very happy to share these spaces with us. And as Myleene says, we should take them up on that offer. Find a TikTok video that you think is funny. You'll share it. They'll go, lol, that is like literally, that meme is 2 years old, mum. But you know what? They'll think it's hilarious, and they will find it endearing. So just come on to TikTok and start sharing and start being part of their world and their conversation. And I think that as well as being there for them, I think you may find that you have a good time along the way.
Yes, surprise. Yes, you can actually enjoy it. Myleene and Alexandra, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been wonderful to talk to you both. Where should people head to find out more about what we've been discussing today?
Ooh, well, if you want to go onto TikTok, I thoroughly recommend our Safety Centre. That has some brilliant tips for parents, but also dedicated pages dealing with some really important safety issues like bullying, eating disorders, well-being, and things like that. So please do dig in. But otherwise, just go onto TikTok and take a look around. I think that, as Myleene says, to know it is to understand it, and usually with TikTok, to know it is to love it. So come on board.
I'd also say, have another conversation with your children. There's so many children out there that would love to be able to share what they're looking at, rather than just say, get off your phones. Actually say, what are you looking at? What's good at the moment? What are people into? What are the new trends? Yeah. And it's quite surprising. It really is. As much as they want to raid your wardrobe, they also they want to see. They're looking back at things that we were initially watching the first time round. So we're really cool because we're retro.
That's a good euphemism. I like it. I'm not old. I'm retro.
I'm retro. I love it. On that note, thank you so much for joining me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having us.